Okay guys, so this week we're going to talk about appetite management. Okay, there are two main influences which are going to affect your appetite. These are the process of hunger and the process of satiety. So the hunger response in the body is the biological drive to eat, whereas satiety is the process of feeling full to or beyond satisfaction. Both of these processes are completely within opposition. Whichever of these processes are more prominent, it will affect the duration in between meals and our appetite levels. If hunger is a more prominent force or influencer, the duration between meals is going to be greatly shortened. However, if the satiety response or a feeling of satisfaction after a meal is prolonged, duration of meals will be prolonged also. So why is this information relevant to you? Why do you need to know how to promote that satiety response? The reason is the diet. So you are subjected to a diet that is calorie restricted. Essentially, we are reducing your calorific intake within the hopes to put you in what is known as a calorie deficit. So whilst on a calorie deficit, we are reducing your consumption of food within the hopes that your expenditure will therefore exceed your consumption. i.e. you are consuming less than you are expending. So therefore that creates an imbalance. That imbalance must be rectified. We will use stored energy in order to rectify that imbalance. Okay, we have stored energy in the form of fat, okay, within the hopes that we will break down the fat deposits within our body, therefore improving our body composition. So how will the promotion of satiety actually improve our body composition? Simply put, if you are satisfied with the consumption of your food, it will stop you from making poor decisions when you are hungry. So you're less likely to indulge on things that you know that are going to be less beneficial to you. In order to maximize satiety, we need to understand, firstly, how our body perceives appetite. So what are the initial reception mechanisms which actually tell the body whether there is enough food in the body or there is not? These receptors will actually communicate information over to the appetite regulatory center of the body, which will then either initiate that hunger or that satiety response. So within the body, we have three perception mechanisms. So the first is psychological. We perceive the amount of food that we've consumed. Okay, if it's perceived that we've had a lot of food, that information will be sent over to the regulatory center. If it is perceived that we've had very little, that information will also be sent over. We then have what's known as a mechanical reception mechanism. So mechanical receptors are in the form of certain cells. So these cells are known as proprioceptors or stretch receptors. These proprio or stretch receptors line the intestine and the stomach. Okay? So upon the ingestion of food, these receptors are stimulated as the stomach stretches to accommodate for the increased volume of food that is being consumed. And this information will be sent over to that regulatory center. However, if there is not enough food that has been consumed, these receptors will not actually be stimulated. So the final reception mechanism is in line with chemical messages within the bloodstream. So upon certain chemical messages being entered into the bloodstream, the body will initiate a certain response within reaction. In terms of that satiety response, certain chemicals are released upon the ingestion of food. These chemicals will actually move through the bloodstream to that regulatory center and will communicate change or whether a response needs to be initiated. Similarly, when there is a reduced volume of food being ingested, there are less of these messenger molecules being sent out, therefore initiating that hunger response. The appetite center of the body is located in the brain, okay, specifically within the hypothalamus or the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus. Okay, you don't need to know that. All you need to know is located in the brain. So all the information that has actually been picked up that we described previously from mechanical receptor, psychological perception, or chemoreception will actually be sent over to the hypothalamus to be processed. So once it's actually been assessed whether you are hungry or you are satiated, the hypothalamus will actually initiate a cascade of reactions to either cause this hunger response or cause this satiety response. This is done through two separate processes. Once it has been decided that you are hungry, the hypothalamus will release a hormone known as neuropeptide Y. Neuropeptide Y will have a series of effects on the body in order to promote that hunger response. These effects span from salivation at the mouth all the way to that grumble in your stomach you feel when you are hungry. Alternatively, when it has been perceived that the amount of food that we have consumed is enough, i.e. we are satisfied, the hypothalamus will initiate another series of responses. The hypothalamus will produce hormones known as CCK and PYY3-36. How do these hormones work? So these hormones, instead of initiating a series of processes like neuropeptide Y, all they do is they block neuropeptide Y from working. They act as inhibitors. They stop neuropeptide Y interfering or causing that hunger response, therefore leading to that satiety response. So, now that we understand the biological processes that take place in order to initiate either the hunger or the satiety response, we can now think of little behavioral modifications we can do in order to promote satiety. The first manipulation we can make is in our food consumption. Specific food groups have different effects on satiety and or hunger. Food groups which are quite fibrous, such as fruit and vegetables, are actually very good at short-term satiation, so that initial satisfaction. Due to their low calorie composition, they could be consumed in relatively large amounts. This means that in terms of initial satiation or satisfaction, they are very good. However, in terms of long-term satiety, they are quite poor. They actually get broken down very quickly. Therefore, they are not good in sustaining that satiety response. Lipids and fats, for example, things like avocados, fatty fish, eggs, nuts, etc., are very poor in terms of short-term satiation. Okay, we often eat too many before we are satisfied. A molecule of fat tends to be quite calorie dense, therefore we don't want to over-consume, especially whilst on a calorie deficit. However, fat is very good in terms of long-term satiety. They're a very good fuel source and therefore will communicate to the brain that our energy levels are full and we do not need to consume any more. Carbohydrates, like for example those contained in starchy vegetables, fruit, grains, etc., are very poor in terms of short-term satiation. Sugar actually wakes up appetite centers of the brain and therefore in terms of satiety they should be avoided. In addition, in terms of long-term satiety, they're actually very poor as well. They're very easily broken down and therefore this will communicate to the appetite centers of the brain that more needs to be consumed. Proteins, such as that found in lean meat and fish, legumes, white poultry, etc., are very good in terms of long and short-term satiety. This is because of their structural integrity and generally their usage within the body. So there's certain behavioral modifications that we can make in order to promote this feeling of satiety, i.e. satisfaction within meals. So one is limiting the range of foods within a meal. Specific satiety theory states that the consumption of very few food groups within a meal will promote satiety quicker than the consumption of a massively varied meal. So limiting the ingredient list will therefore promote that satiety response. Additionally, flavor profiles actually play a massive factor in appetite. Specific flavor profiles, such as foods that are sweet in nature, will actually awaken appetite centers of the brain, thus promoting hunger. The transition from savory to sweet can actually be a massive influencer in that hunger process. So what I would do in certain meals, I would reduce the transition or the contrast in between my flavors. So maybe missing out dessert. Another behavioral modification that can be made is simply changing the bowl or the format of which you place your food. So if you had two bowls containing the same volume of food, however one is a lot bigger than the other, it will be perceived that the one that is bigger has less food in it due to the available space on the bowl or plate. So simply swapping your plate out for a smaller one okay, will give the perception or give that psychological perception that you have eaten more. Okay guys, I hope you found that useful. Okay, any questions you have on the topic that I've just discussed, please let me know. Or if there's anything you want to know about that I can give maybe some information on, feel free to just message me whenever and I'll be happy to cover that topic. Okay, good luck with the next 8 weeks guys. I hope this video has made the diet aspect of this challenge a little bit more bearable. Okay, let me know what you think.